message to give. It's been on my mind for about over a year now, and um, normally when I get up, I have to type most of what I'm going to say out. But the Lord just kept bringing me scripture, and so we'll just let the Lord do all the talking today. So not not to apologize or nothing, because I don't apologize for the word of the Lord, but it may ruffle some feathers, but we'll see. Um, the Lord says to share the gospel with love, so I hope it comes across that way today. Again, it's not pointed toward anybody, because I got a beam out of my eye. The Bible says so big I can't be looking at anybody else's splinters. So we'll start off in Hebrews chapter 11. But here lately, seems like the past 10 years, there's been all these superhero movies coming out, and they've been stealing their characters from the Bible. If you think about it, in 1 Kings 18 and verse 20 or 46, Elijah outran a team of horses. So there's your speed guy. And over in Daniel, there's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There's your firemen. And over in Exodus, Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and there's your water guy. Guy can control water. But there's one key factor in each one of those men of the Bible. And over here in Hebrews 11, it talks about each one, or not each one of the ones I mentioned here, but it talks about many of them. Just a quick glance over it. There's Moses and Noah and Isaac and Jacob and Abraham, and just so many of them, and Enoch, and but it all says by faith. So we're going to look at a character, a man of the Bible, not a character, but a man of the Bible. We're going to start reading in chapter 11 and verse 32. And what shall I say? What shall I more say? The time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and of Samson and Jehoshaphat and David also, and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. So today we're going to be looking at Samson over in Judges. We'll be getting our main text from over there. But notice it was only by faith that Samson got his strength from. So we'll be in Judges chapter 14. We're going to read the latter part of 13, a couple of verses. But it's a sad thing that most people know about Samson is that Delilah cut his hair and he lost his strength. Samson didn't have his strength through his hair, it was through the Lord. And like I said, we'll start reading at the end of verse 13, or chapter 13 rather, in Judges. And the woman bare a son and called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan toward Zorah and Eshtal. Wouldn't that be a blessing to be able to stop and read that right there, that the Lord blessed Samson? But as many of us know, that Samson just keeps going down, as we'll see here in just a minute. Haven't quite made up my mind of which verses I'm going to read first, so I think I'll just run through the first part of this chapter 14, just to run through the first part. Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then went Samson down and his father and his mother to Timnath, and came to the vineyard of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand. But he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. After a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took therefore in his hands and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he told not them that he had taken the honey out of a carcass of a lion. We'll just stop there for a second, but if Brother Tyler, will you lead us in a word of prayer? So we didn't read all of chapter 13, but an angel came down and talked to Samson's parents, told him that he was to have a Nazarene vow, Nazarene vow. I get confused between Nazarene and Nazarite, but it was a Nazarene vow. And I'm not sure how many of y'all know what it takes to have a Nazarene vow. So we're going to turn over to Numbers chapter 6. Number 6, and we'll start reading in verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When either man or woman shall separate themselves, to vow a vow of a Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine or vinegar of strong drink, neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, or eat moist grapes, or dried. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. All the days of the vow of his separation there shall no razor come upon his head, till the days be fulfilled, in the which he separateth himself unto the Lord. He shall be holy, and shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow. All the days that he separateth himself unto the Lord, he shall come at no dead body. He shall not make himself unclean for his father, or for his mother, for his brother, or for his sister, when they die, because the consecration of his God is upon his head. All the days of his separation he is holy unto the Lord. And if any man die very suddenly by him, and he hath defiled the head of his consecration, and he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing, on the 7th day shall he shave it. And on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, and make an atonement for him, for that he sinned by the dead, and shall hallow his head that same day. So we'll stop there just for the time being. But so we see that there's 3 rules to this Nazarite vow: not to have any, consume anything from the vine at all. And it's said at the latter part of verse 4, from the kernel even to the husk. You start out by planting seeds. You start planting anything by the seeds, and always the last thing is the husk. You think of corn. You start out with the seed and you plant it, and after harvest comes, the only thing left on the ground is the husk. So if it falls anywhere between the seed or to the husk, they're to have nothing to do with it. And they say, well, back in those times, they used wine to purify water. They used wine. The Bible said a little wine is good for the stomach. The Bible said here that he was to have nothing to do with it. And the next part there is that there's no razor to come upon his head. Back in those days, it was a shame for a man to have long hair. God created men to look like men and women to look like women, and not to cross that line. And so, for a man to have long hair was to be a shame unto him. And then the latter part there is he's not to come around any dead body. Now, I couldn't find if it was just human dead bodies or just dead bodies in general, but the latter part of here that we read only talks about his father dying or his mother or brother or sister or just anybody like that. But we saw there in Judges that he killed that lion and he shouldn't be around dead bodies. But this was a big inconvenience as far as having a Nazarite vow. You were set apart. You were an extreme. Um, your thought of mind was not what do I have to do for God, but what can I do for God. Your thought process wasn't how can I go this far for God, but um, how far do I have to go. Your thought of mind was how far can I go for the Lord. You know, one of our presidents said, "What ask not what you can do for your country, or ask not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country?" And that's the same thing. What can I do for God instead of what God can do for me? So we see here that this was um, a big deal to take upon, and I made sure to mention that if he did come across a dead body, that there was a way to renew his vow, and it was you had to stoop, get rid of your pride, and go and shave your head and start all over. So we'll see here back in Judges chapter 13 or 14 rather, and we're gonna go through these verses that we already read. Judges 14 and we'll just read verse 1 and 2 right now. And Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughter of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. You know, as a parent, as a child is living under your house, I've always heard it said, living under my parents, my house, my rules. And it wasn't because they were out to get me, it's because they knew better than I did. So when he comes to his father and mother and says, I found a woman, their first answer should be where? And he said, well, I found her just down the road. All right, where? Well, Dad, she's pretty. Where? Well, she's the Philistines. That's when they should have nipped it in the bud and said no. God said over in Deuteronomy chapter 7, Deuteronomy 7, start reading in verse 1. When the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land which thou goest to possess it, and hast cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites and the Gershites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. Notice he said thou, not us. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. A daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. For they will turn away thy son from following me, that that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. I think I'll stop in there. Yeah, I'll read it to verse 6. But thus shall ye deal with them. Ye shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So just the number one red flag right there is that she's a Philistine. Continue reading in verse 3. And his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife on the uncircumcised Philistines. And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, and he sought an occasion against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So like I said over in Deuteronomy, the Lord told them not to marry them, not their sons, not their daughters, none of them. And so this is we see the first part of Samson's falling. As we saw there in verse 1, it says he went down. And there in verse 3 it says that, or verse 4 rather, that his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. We see over and over in the Bible that the Lord, like in Jonah, that the Lord had already prepared a fish for Jonah. The Lord knew that Jonah wasn't going to go to Nineveh right off, and the Lord had prepared a great fish. So we see here again that the Lord knew that he was going to go after a Philistine woman, but yet he still blessed Samson with strength. And continue reading in verse 5 here. Then went Samson down and his father and his mother to Timnath, and came to the vineyard of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he ran him as he would have ran a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father nor his mother what he had done. So we see here the first part of verse 5 that Samson went down, and his father and mother went with him. My sin will bring other people down. My sin will bring other people down with me. And the vow of the Nazarite and the Nazarene, however you say that, he wasn't to go anywhere around wine or have anything to do with grapes, but yet we found this woman in a vineyard, and he stopped and he spoke to her there. And if you turn over to Psalms chapter 1, Psalms chapter 1, we'll just read a couple of verses here. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in the law doth he meditate day and night. So we see in verse 1 that it's a progression. First you're walking, then you're standing, then you're sitting. And this is how Samson starts out. First he sees a woman, now he's standing there talking to her, and as we'll see later on, things just keep progressing. And now we've seen the word down 3 times so far in this chapter in just these short verses. And just like over in Jonah, Jonah just keeps going down, down, and down. And there's lost my trail of thought there. As he keeps going down, it gets harder to turn from your sin, as we see so many times that you don't have to worry about stopping a sin if you never start it. You never have to worry about taking your last drink of alcohol if you never take your first, or never stop worrying about popping those pills if you never start doing it. So we see here in verse 7, we'll read this real quick. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So now he's standing in the seat, or standeth in the way of the sinner, as we saw there in Psalms there. So I did skip a point here. Actually, I've skipped several, so we'll continue in verse 5. No, I told the vineyard. Verse 6, rather. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he ran him as he would have ran a kid, and he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. If you have a victory in your life that you can't tell anybody about, that's not a victory. If you can't tell somebody that I almost took my first drink, but I didn't, or I almost smoked that first cigarette, but I didn't, that's not a victory you want to have in your life. If you can't tell your father or your mother things that are going on in your life, you shouldn't be doing it. And he went down, and at verse 7, he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. And he took therefore in his hand and went on eating, and came to his father and his mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. But he took not them that he had taken, or he told not them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So we saw in the vow that he's not supposed to be around any dead body, and yet we see that he goes to the carcass of this lion. And don't you just know it that the devil would put something in my life, something sweet as honey, but yet wrap it in a carcass, and just to see if I would stick my hand in it and take it. Over and over, we see in the Bible that the land of Canaan is flowing with milk and honey. And over in 1 Samuel 14, 1 Samuel 14 and we'll start in verse 24. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth any food until the evening, that I may be avenged mine enemies. So none of the people tasted any food. And all they of the land came to a wood, and there was honey upon the ground. And when the people were coming to the wood, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the Lord. There's so much honey in this land that it's dropping from the trees, and yet Samson decides to eat out of a carcass of a lion. So we see here, and this doesn't necessarily have to just strictly refer to marrying a Philistine. This can be where you find a job, whether whether where to buy a home or just wherever. If we'll just take a job for instance that, you know, where'd you find this job? Well, it's close to the house. Okay, well, um, tell me about this job. Well, I make good money. Well, tell me more about this job. Well, I'll have to work. I'll miss church every now and then, or I have to move to Florida or something, you know. And so it's just something to think about. But you know, it never really. The Bible is so much in depth that you can read it over and over, and it changes every time you read it to certain things that are going on in your life. So we'll continue reading here in verse 10. So his father went down. So here we go. His father is following him down unto the woman, and Samson made her feast, for so used the young men to do. And it came to pass when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it to me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garment. Now, 30 changes of garment back then, that's a whole month's worth of clothes. And when you had to go back down to the river to wash your clothes, that was a big deal. But we'll continue here. But if ye cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garment. And they said unto him, Put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. I just read it, and I've been reading it all week, and I still couldn't figure it out. I don't know if it's just Hebrew talk, how it translates over, but I still don't get the answer to it. But anyway, we'll get to the answer here in a minute. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice thy husband, that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take that we have? Is it not so? And Samson's wife wept before him, and said, Thou dost thou but hate me, and lovest me not? Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother, and shall I tell it thee? So we'll stop here for a second. This verse 16 is packed full of little things, but see, I can say this because I don't have to go home and hear about it, but this is the chapter 1 of the marriage book. You hate me. You just don't love me. And then But here in the middle, this is where we see the Philistine come out. It says, the riddle, you have told a riddle unto the children of my people, and thou hast not told it me. So we see where her alliance lies. It is still with the Philistines. Now, granted, it escalated pretty quickly that just because they didn't want to pay Samson 30 changes of garment, they were going to kill her and her family. So um, goes to show you how the Philistines were back then. But um, but anyway, we just see where her alliance lies is still with the Philistines. And when decisions are going to come to be made, her way of thinking is the Philistine way of thinking, and Samson's way should be toward the Nazarene vow toward God. And verse 17, and she wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. And came to pass on the seventh day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him. And she told the riddle to the children of her people. Notice there again, told it to her people. So Samson was, from what I can tell and what I've found, Samson was the strongest man to ever live. But yet his wife um, lay sore upon him, and she just wore him down to got him to tell him the answer to the riddle. And verse 18 here, and the men of the city said unto him on the seventh day before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? Notice that's probably the first episode of Jeopardy right there. You know how they answer, what is the Empire State Building? What is honey, and what is stronger than a lion? That's probably where they got it from. They keep stealing stuff from the Bible. And he said unto them, if ye have not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. Now, isn't that a strange way to talk about your wife? I don't know how them New Testament or them new fangled Bibles say that, but that's a strange way to talk about your wife. You plow with my heifer, man. But anyway, we'll just keep on here. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and went down to Ashkelon. So now we see that is the fifth time here in this chapter that Samson has went down. And he slew 30 men of them and took their spoil and gave charge of garment or change of garment unto them which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. So notice that he slew 30 men. So what is a Nazarene, or what is a man with a Nazarene vow doing, killing 30 men when he shouldn't be around dead bodies? And notice that he took their spoil and gave the garments to them which expounded the riddle. Notice it didn't say that he gave it to all of them, because as we saw, there was 30 men that was with Samson there at the beginning. So just to show you how the Philistines are, they didn't even want to tell each other the answer to the riddle. They just told a few of them. And his anger was kindled, and Samson left and went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. And you think, oh, well, that's just terrible. Whatever happened till death do us part. Philistines don't believe that. That's Bible stuff. If you want to marry a Philistine that thinks the way Philistines think, as the saying goes, you reap what you sow. We're just going to read the first part of chapter 15 here. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid. And he said, I will go in unto my wife into the chamber. But his father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. So we see how these Philistines are. If you don't like the one, go to the other. And it's just not the way the Lord intended it to be. And just going to look over my notes here real quick, make sure I got everything I was felt led to talk about, but it looks like it. But we make decisions in life, and we go through life, and like I said, all of us know the story of Samson, cutting his hair and then losing his strength. But if you follow your flesh, the lust of the flesh, the lust of your eyes, and the pride of life, that sin will lead you blind and a slave in bondage, and eventually to death. You can't quit what you haven't started, drinking or drugs or whatever you want to fill in there. But if you leave it with the Lord today, because it's easier to leave it with Him now than it will be tomorrow or the next time. It always gets harder the more the deeper into sin and the further down you go, the harder it is to get away from it. But only the Lord can break the chains of sin. So I hope you all got something out of that. Um, it was a joy to study. If Brother Reese, would you come and close us in a hymn?